hear footprints. Hear that? I could hear them walking around the van.
Today we're going to be diving into everyone's favorite corner of the internet, Reddit, specifically the scary stories of Reddit. Get ready to not sleep tonight. Starting off our list today with a story submitted to Reddit by user MaliaGirl1314 titled, "My wife is peeking at me." And honestly, this thing is pure nightmare fuel. It's long, so here's the cliff notes. Listen at your own risk. The story was written by a man about his wife Lynn, who he had been married to for 6 years and 11 months with no issues, until one day he caught her peeking. Just peeking at him from behind the wall. He thought it was strange because she wasn't one for pranks or games, but when he caught her, she ran away giggling like a schoolgirl. He was weirded out, but he shook it off until about 3 days later. He went downstairs in the middle of the night for a drink of water and looked down at the floor to see his wife staring at him with wide eyes and a plastered on smile before scurrying away on all fours. Weeks later, while in the shower, he opened his eyes to see her head stretched into the shower, eyes red and unblinking, with the same creepy smile plastered across her face. He screamed and she ran, slamming the bathroom door behind her. Or so he thought, because when he stepped out of the shower, he got that same sinking feeling that he was being watched. He looked up to see his wife peering at him from the top of the closet door in the bathroom. He fled to his brothers, who a few nights later convinced him to return home and face his wife. The two went back to the house only to be met with a horrible stench and shattered glass strewn across the stairs. Lynn was nowhere to be found, and so the husband began packing up a bag. But when he opened the closet, he saw pairs of real eyeballs lined up along the closet floor. And then all of a sudden, there it was again, the sinking feeling that he and his brother were being watched. He peered under the bed to see his wife staring back at him, her hands stained red clasped together under her chin in excitement. She tried to attack him and his brother, but thankfully they managed to escape. They called the police, but she was never captured. The husband then went to stay in a motel, which is where he wrote the story, but it ends with him saying that all of a sudden he began to get that eerie feeling once more. And then a text popped up on his phone. Just 3 words and a photograph. "I found you," and his wife's unblinking, smile-plastered face. Already covered in goosebumps. This next one was posted to Reddit by user Gray Bread, and it is called "I Know You're Awake." The story goes that one night, a young man was asleep in bed when all of a sudden he hears footsteps outside of his door. He holds the covers up and opens his eyes ever so slightly to see a large man stepping into his room, holding the dead bodies of both of the young man's parents. The large man then props the mother and father's lifeless bodies up in some chairs located at the corner of the room, and then takes the red seeping from their wounds and writes something on the wall before crawling underneath the young man's bed. It's dark, and so the young man can't quite make out what the message reads. He pretends to be asleep until his eyes adjust to the light, and he can finally read what the large man wrote on the wall. He gasps when he finally makes out the words, "I know you're awake." He then hears movement coming from underneath the bed. The next story was submitted to Reddit by user NSL Lewis, and it's called "My Wife Has a Removable Face." It was their 3rd date when Lewis leaned in to kiss Samantha. She stopped him and told him something he had never heard before, that she had a removable face. At first he assumed she was joking, but then she showed him the slight inconsistency at the bottom of her chin that proved that what she was saying was in fact true. She gave him the option to leave, but he stayed, and eventually the pair were engaged. Everything seemed normal except for the fact that once a day Samantha locked herself in the bathroom for an hour to clean her face. She would remove it and disinfect it, otherwise it would begin to smell and eventually rot. Lewis was never allowed to see her true face, nor was he allowed to know how the whole thing came to be. No one knew about Samantha's condition except for Lewis and his friend Chris, who he had drunkenly confessed the secret to one night on his bachelor's trip. Years later, after Lewis and Samantha Samantha had tied the knot, Chris came to visit them in their home. While Lewis was on a work call, Samantha went upstairs to freshen up, and that is when Chris's curiosity got the best of him. Using a paperclip, he unlocked the bathroom door where Samantha was cleaning her face, and then all of a sudden Lewis heard screaming. He ran upstairs to find Chris in hysterics, using the same paperclip he had used to get into the bathroom to repeatedly impale his eyes. While Samantha screamed, "He looked! Call the police! He looked!" Chris was taken into hospital, seizing and covered in bodily fluids. When the story was written, Chris had been admitted to the hospital, now completely blind and virtually unresponsive, save his frequent fits of violent paranoid mania. Samantha is distraught at what has happened to Chris, and Lewis is more curious than ever to see his wife's real face. For this next one, I thought I'd take the time to rattle off two-sentence horror stories I found while exploring the dark world of scary Reddit. The first story comes from Reddit user according_rise602, and it goes: "My mother called me and told me she was 20 minutes away and to shut and lock all the doors and windows. But I can see her and dad standing in the driveway with big smiles calling my name." The second two-sentence horror story was posted by user OK_relationship_4162. "Every night I hear my closet door open and heavy breathing, but I tell myself it's nothing and then go back to sleep. Tonight when I heard the door open, I closed my eyes, but when the breathing got louder, I opened them to see that whatever had been hiding in my closet was now standing over me with its jaw unhinged, revealing many layers of sharp teeth." This next story was posted to Reddit by user Grand Theft Motto. I will be calling him Motto, and it's called "Something Walks Whistling Past My House Every Night at 3:03. When Motto moved into a new neighborhood with his family, they were greeted by a welcoming committee who told them about how the neighborhood was extremely good to those who lived there, in that it brought them an immense amount of luck in the form of a million little blessings. Motto and his family had actually seen these blessings firsthand, as shortly after moving into the neighborhood, Nola, Motto's sister, was finally able to breathe on her first time without the use of an iron lung, and she started becoming healthy and growing normally after such a rocky start in life. While this was fantastic, the welcoming committee also had a warning for the family. Never look for the source of the whistles heard throughout the neighborhood from 3:03 to 3:05 a.m. Those who do experience tragedy and great misfortune, as well as having the life completely drained from their bodies. The family followed the rules to a T, with Motto's father even buying heavy-duty blinds that he locked each and every night to keep himself, his wife, Motto, and Nola from ever looking for the source of the whistling. All was well and the blessings were plenty until one night Motto had a friend, Holden, over to spend the night. He was new to the neighborhood and he didn't seem to take the whistling as seriously as everyone else did. Holden managed to steal a key from Motto's father, and at 3:03, right as the whistling began, he went over to the blinds, unlocked them, and looked out the window. Motto shielded his and Nola's eyes while Holden screamed and closed the blinds. Motto's parents woke up and then joined the three downstairs right before the knocking started. Loud pounding on the front door, then the back, then the windows, then the walls, then all at once, and it only stopped when Holden yelled out, "I promise I won't tell them what I saw." Silence, and then just a small tapping on the window for the rest of the night. The next morning, Motto's father took Holden back to his house, and that day, Holden and his family left the neighborhood, their bodies moving somewhat limp and the life completely drained from their eyes. Okay, this next story was submitted to Reddit by user sufficient_moose67. It's a story that they were told when they were young, one that I have also heard when I was young, and it haunted my dreams for years. It's called "Dogs Aren't the Only Ones Who Lick." Story goes that one day a woman living alone felt a lick on her hand. She looked down to see her dog standing next to her. A few days went by, again she felt a lick on her hand, but this time her dog was about a step away. Thinking that he had licked her hand and taken a step back, she thought nothing of it and went about her day. The next day, she felt a lick, but when she looked down, she didn't see her dog. In fact, the dog was standing at the other side of the room. The next day it happened again. This time, her dog was asleep in the room next to hers. A few days later, she felt another lick, but this time, her dog was nowhere to be found. She looked high and low around her home before finally checking the bathroom. The curtain was closed in the shower, and so she opened it to reveal the lifeless body of her dog and a message written in BLOOD that read, "Dogs aren't the only ones who lick." Next up, we have a story submitted by do-tomatillo5363 that I like to call Cleaner Together. It's pretty short, so here goes. I was taking a shower and decided to wash my hair. As I was washing it, some shampoo had gotten into my eyes. As I was using my hands to wipe the shampoo out of my eyes, I felt as though something was standing in front of me. I opened them quickly and I saw something. I closed them in panic, and when I opened them again, I didn't see anything. So I went back to rinsing out my eyes when all of a sudden I realized that something was still scrubbing the back of my head. I mean, as if closing your eyes in the shower wasn't already scary enough, now you have to worry about whatever the heck that thing was. Hell no. I'm so beyond over scary shower stories at this point, it's actually unreal. I'm changing all my shower curtains for doors and wearing goggles in the shower. Okay, it's getting pretty creepy up in here, so let's throw in another two-sentence horror stories for good measure. The first was submitted by Federal-Hornter01671, and it goes like this. I was tossing and turning all night because I felt like something was crawling over my skin. It wasn't until I went into the bathroom and looked into the mirror that I realized it was actually because something was crawling in it. Gross. Yeah, think about that. Think about bugs under your skin when you're going to sleep tonight. Next story comes from user Miami Metro, and it goes, growing up with cats and dogs, I got used to the sounds of scratching at my door while I slept. Now that I live alone, it's much more unsettling. Oh god, I feel like with that one we're looking down the barrel of a dogs aren't the only ones who lick sequel called cats aren't the only one who scratch. Big no for me. Let's move on. Next story comes from Reddit user It's a Miracle, who said that they used to sleepwalk when they were younger, often waking up outside in the middle of the night before making their way back into the darkened doorway of their home, where they had left the doors wide open as almost an invitation to whomever might be lurking around in the night. One night, however, they had a different experience. In their sleep, they had walked over to the window on the ground floor and drawn the curtains fully open, when all of a sudden they came to and were face to face with a large, completely hairless man inching closer and closer towards the window. Frozen in place, they let out a loud scream before emptying their bladder onto the floor. The man outside the window then screamed himself before running off into the night. When the user, It's a Miracle, told his mother what had happened, she thought it must have been a dream, until they went outside and they found a screwdriver on the front porch along with damage to the door jamb and door handle. Thank God for sleepwalking, I guess. And we're going to finish things off today with two more two-sentence horror stories because they creep me out, and I want you to think about these as you crawl into bed tonight. The first comes from user Just Another Muffled Vo and reads, as I began tucking him into bed, he tells me, Daddy, check for monsters under my bed. I look underneath for his amusement, but to my horror, I see another him staring back at me, quivering as he whispers, Daddy, there's something on my bed. And finally, for our last bedtime story, we have two sentences posted by Unbreakable Ned that read, I lay shaking underneath my blanket, hiding from the monster, too afraid to move. All of a sudden, I heard him say, blankets aren't weapon-proof, before unzipping his bag. So yeah, if you were planning on hiding under your blanket because you're freaked out after this video, don't bother, it doesn't work. Thanks, Unbreakable Neb. You guys, I've been your host. I've had goosebumps this entire time because these stories freak me out. Hannah Thompson, see you next time.